Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we're going all the way back to 1935 in Kansas City.
Oh, yeah.
So picture this. The hotel president, a busy spot right in the middle of the city action. And in room 1046, there's this man, Artemus Ogletree,
Right.
found dead.
Yes.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
It's been almost 90 years, and the case is still ice cold.
It's true. One of those mysteries that just never seems to go away. It has frustrated and fascinated investigators for decades. And it all starts with this guy checking into the hotel under a fake name, Roland T. Owen.
Okay, so right off the bat, we got fake names.
Yep.
We're talking crypt messages, an anonymous, benefactor. It's straight out of, a classic film noir,
Yeah.
So take me back to the beginning. What was so strange about Ogletree's stay at the hotel president?
Well, from the moment Roland T. Owen walks into the hotel, there was something just, I don't know, off about him, Like, he asked for this dark room, one of those interior ones, and he always kept the shades drawn, almost like he was, hiding from something or someone.
Yeah.
He didn't have much luggage, either. Just the basics, really. And then there's this note.
Ooh, a note. Okay, now we're talking. Tell me more about this note.
So they find this message in his room, right? Simple, addressed to Don.
Okay.
It just said, Don, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait, short, cryptic, and just, unsettling?
I mean, right away, it makes you think, what's the deal with Ogletree and this dump?
I mean, exactly.
Were they friends, business partners? I mean, was it something more, I don't know, shady?
Well, the note definitely says there's some kind of connection, but figuring out what that connection is, well, that's one of the big mysteries, like a huge question mark hanging over the whole thing.
Yeah.
And to add to that, the hotel staff, they were saying Ogletree was acting all nervous and jumpy, like he was scared of something, like constantly looking over his shoulder.
Okay, so we've got this guest who's hiding in plain sight. Then there's this mysterious dong and this thick atmosphere of fear hanging around. It's like all the pieces of a classic, thriller are falling into place. But did anyone see Ogletree outside the hotel?
Well, there's this one story.
Yeah.
It's a little creepy, honestly. One of the city workers said he ran into a guy who looked just like Ogletree the night before the murder.
Really?
Yeah, but the guy was only wearing his underwear.
Oh, wow.
And had this nasty scratch on his arm, like a deep one. Apparently he was desperate for a ride and even mumbled something about killing someone the next day.
Okay, now that's not just creepy, that's full-on terrifying. And knowing what happens next, it makes you wonder, was that encounter somehow connected to Ogletree's,
You can't help but wonder, right? It's the kind of detail that just sticks with you. It's a question that investigators have been wrestling with for decades. And then, the very next morning, January 4th, room 1046 became a crime scene.
Oh, man. So I imagine the hotel staff walked into a scene straight out of Nightmare.
Oh, absolutely. Ogletree was found bound, beaten, and stagged.
Oh, my gosh.
But here's the crazy part. He was still alive.
He was?
Yep.
But how?
Well, the thing is, when they asked him what happened, he claimed he just fell and hit his head.
Wait, hold on. Bound, beaten, stabbed, and he's saying it was just a fall? That's a little hard to believe, don't you think? What did the investigators find at the scene?
Well, the scene was almost as confusing of Ogletree's story. There were no clothes except what he was wearing, no toiletries, and no sign of the weapon.
It's almost like he was trying to wipe away any trace of himself from that room. But, I mean, they had to find something, right? Some clue.
Well, they did find a bottle of diluted sulfuric acid.
Acid. In a hotel room? That's not something you see every day. What was he doing with acid?
Your guess is as good as mine. But you got to admit, it's not your typical travel item, right?
Not at all.
And when you combine that with how brutal the attack was, it makes you think this was planned,
Yeah, definitely premeditated. This is crazy. We've got acid, a mysterious dawn, and a victim who's practically trying to disappear. This case is like a puzzle box, and every time you think you're getting close to solving it, you just find more questions. But I'm guessing the biggest question for the investigators was, who was this Roland T. Owen?
Absolutely. Figuring out who he really was, that was the first big hurdle.
Right.
The LA address he gave, fake. His fingerprints, no match anywhere. And all those tips from the public, they all led to dead ends.
It's like they were chasing a ghost. But we know he had a real name, Artemus Ogletree. How did they finally put that together?
It's a strange twist, really. It actually took Roland T. Owen's death for the truth about Artemus Ogletree to start coming out.
Wow, that's incredible. So the investigation began with a fake name. And even after his death, the mystery just kept getting deeper. What happened after Ogletree died.
Well, let's just say that even in death, Artemus Ogletree kept people guessing. It all started with a surprising act of generosity from a complete stranger. Someone, anonymously, donated money to make sure he had a proper funeral and burial.
Wow, that's surprisingly kind, especially given everything that was going on. Any idea who this mystery benefactor was?
There wasn't a name, but there was a message. Along with the funeral donation, there was a bouquet of flowers and a card. It just said, "Love forever, Louise."
Love Forever Louise. It's almost romantic in a tragic kind of way. It's like a whisper from a hidden part of Ogletree's life. I'm guessing Louise is another piece of this puzzle that investigators couldn't figure out.
She is, and it gets weirder. The police got a bunch of phone calls from some guy who claimed he knew why Ogletree was killed.
Oh.
Said it was revenge, something about cheaters getting what's coming to them.
Oh, wow. So now we've got anonymous donations, a mysterious Louise, and maybe a love triangle gone wrong. How did the police even begin to unravel any of this?
Believe it or not, it was a photo in a national magazine that finally cracked the case of Roland T. Owen. Over a year after the murder, Ogletree's mother saw his picture in the American Weekly and recognized a scar on his head.
It's wild to think that back then you could vanish so easily. There were no national databases, no instant fingerprint checks. It just goes to show you the challenges investigators faced before all that technology. But it's amazing that his own mother had no idea he was in Kansas City living under a false name. Were they out of touch?
No, but you see, she knew him as Artemus Ogletree, not this Roland T. Owen. She confirmed it was him, and that gave investigators the missing piece they'd been searching for.
That's unbelievable. It makes you wonder what else Ogletree might have been hiding from his family. Did his mother know anything about Dawn or Louise?
She didn't, but she did tell them something that left everyone even more baffled. Something that added a whole new level of weird to this already bizarre case.
Okay, I gotta know, what could be stranger than everything we've already heard?
Ogletree's mother said she got letters from him, letters postmarked after he died.
Letters from beyond the grave. You're kidding. This just keeps getting creepier and creepier.
The first letter was postmarked from Chicago. It was type, which was strange because his mother said Artemus didn't know how to type. Then another one said he was going to Europe, and then another that his ship was leaving that day from New York. All sent after he was already dead.
Hold on a second. Now I'm officially spooked. This sounds like we've wandered into a ghost story or something. Who was sending these letters and why?
And then there's this phone call. Some guy in Memphis calls Ogletree's mother, says that Artemus saved him from some thugs in Cairo and is now living there with a rich wife.
So was any of this true? Did Artemus Ogletree somehow cheat death and escape to have a globe-trotting adventure?
Well, that's where things get even more confusing. Even with the letters and the phone call, shipping records show zero evidence that Ogletree ever left the country.
So we're left with all these questions. Who was Dawn? Who was Louise? What was Ogletree running from, or running towards? And who was sending those letters and making those calls after he was dead?
And speaking of disappearing acts, let's talk about this mysterious Don. He seems to vanish as quickly as he shows up in this story.
This is exactly why I love a good deep dive. There's always more to uncover, another twist around the corner. So, did the investigators ever figure out who Don was?
Don is like this loose thread in this whole mess, you know. We never really find out who he is, but there are some interesting theories that came up during the investigation. One theory says Don wasn't actually a name, but more like a title, something they use in, organized crime.
Wait, are you saying Don could have been like a mob boss? That changes things. What made investigators think of that?
Remember how Ogletree was so insistent on staying in those dark rooms tucked away? Some people thought maybe he was dodging someone with, let's say, connections. And then you've got the brutality of the attack, the acid, that kind of stuff. It lines up with how certain organizations operate. You know what I mean?
It's a scary thought for sure. If Ogletree was caught up with the mob, that could explain a lot. The fear, the secrets, the disappearing act. Was there anything else that pointed to a mob connection?
Well, there's that thing about Ogletree staying at the St. Regis Hotel before the president. Turns out he shared a room with another guy there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, maybe that guy was Don, and they were involved in something together, something risky enough to need all that secrecy.
Okay, so we've got a possible mob link, a mystery roommate, and a victim who's living in fear. But what about Louise? She's still a big question mark. Did they ever figure out who it was, her connection to Ogletree?
Louise, just like Don, is a total mystery. Was she a girlfriend? A friend? Part of whatever was going on? We'll probably never know. We can guess. But without hard proof, her role in all of this is still unknown.
It's amazing and kind of frustrating how some people, in this case, Dawn, Louise, they pop up and vanish like ghosts. But those letters sent to Ogletree's mom after he died, any progress on who sent those and why?
That's where things get really strange. Years after the investigation started, there was this chilling link discovered connecting the Ogletree case to a murder in New York City.
You mean the 1937 murder? The one where that guy, Joseph Martin, got arrested for killing his roommate and trying to ship the body to Memphis in a trunk? What does that have to do with Artemus Ogletree?
At first, it seems like they have nothing in common, but then it comes out that this Joseph Martin used a lot of fake names, and one of those names was Donald Kelso.
Wait, Don Old Kelso, as in Don from that note in Ogletree's room? That can't be a coincidence, can it?
It's hard to ignore, right? And it gets even weirder. Handwriting experts looked at the letters sent to Ogletree's mom, and guess what? They matched Donald Kelso's handwriting.
No way. You're saying the guy arrested for murder in New York might be the same Don from Kansas City? It's like these two completely different worlds collided. But did they ever prove that Donald Kelso was the Don from the note?
The cops in Kansas City thought they had a pretty good case, circumstantial, but they never actually charged Kelso with Ogletree's murder, even with the FBI stepping in. They couldn't find that one piece of solid evidence that would stick.
It's like having all the pieces of a puzzle, but they just don't quite fit. So much of this case hinges on Don, and yet he's like this ghost we can't catch. It must have been frustrating for those investigators.
It just goes to show you that sometimes, even when you try your hardest, some mysteries stay mysteries. But remember that story about the historian getting that phone call years later? The one about a possible stash of clues?
Yeah, the one about the historian at the Kansas City Public Library. Someone said they had a shoebox full of info on the Ogletree case or whatever came of that.
That phone call is kind of like the whole case shrouded in mystery. This person, they said they had this shoebox filled with newspaper clippings about Ogletree's murder and something else, something specific that was mentioned a lot in the articles.
Okay, now you've got me hooked. Something specific from the newspaper articles. That could be huge. What was it?
The caller wouldn't say. They never said who they were or what this mystery item was, and poof, they disappeared.
Are you serious? After all this time, there might be a clue out there that could finally solve this case. It's both exciting and frustrating to think that we could be so close.
That's the ultimate cliffhanger, right? It leaves you wondering, is that shoebox still out there? Stuck in an attic somewhere, waiting to be found? Or did it just vanish, taking all its secrets with it?
It's like a ghost story inside a mystery. The thought that the answer could be out there, just out of reach, is almost as interesting as the mystery itself. It makes you realize that even today, some stories keep their secrets hidden.
And maybe that's what makes the case of Artemus Ogletree so fascinating. It makes you question what's real and reminds you that some questions might never have a clear answer.
It's a humbling thought. We live in a world where we're drowning in information, but this case shows us that sometimes the best stories are the ones that leave us with more questions than answers. It really makes you think about how complicated history can be, right? We have all these little pieces, these glimpses into the past, but the whole picture is still a mystery.
What's interesting about the Ogletree case is that it shows us the limits of information, even now. We have newspaper stories, police reports, people who saw things, tons of data, but the truth is still hidden. It's like information isn't enough. It's how you understand it, the connections you make, the human part of it, that makes a story come alive.
You're right. It's the questions we're left with, the things we don't know, that keep these stories alive in our minds. We can gather all the facts in the world, but sometimes the most powerful thing is what we don't know.
Think about everything we've talked about today, the twists and turns, those dead ends, and those clues that seem to lead to nowhere. What sticks out to you? What's your theory about what really happened to Artemus Ogletree?
That's what's so great about these deep dives. We can lay out the facts, look at all the different theories, but in the end, it's up to each listener to decide what they think happened. Every detail, every unanswered question, it's like a seed for your own imagination.
Maybe someone listening right now will hear something and suddenly make a connection to something they've read or heard before. Maybe they'll find a new lead in the case. Or, who knows, maybe the right person will hear this story and finally tell us what they know.
That would be amazing, wouldn't it, to finally solve this mystery after all these years. But until then, the story of Artemus Ogletree is a reminder that some questions just don't have answers.
So, it shows us that even in the most ordinary places, like a busy hotel, amazing mysteries can happen. Mysteries that can fascinate us for years, even decades.
So everyone listening, as we wrap up our deep dive into the strange case of Artemus Ogletree, we'll leave you with this thought. Next time you're in a hotel, take a look around. Think about the secrets those walls might hold, the stories from the past that might be hiding there.
Keep your eyes open, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the best stories are the ones that leave us with more questions than answers.
And on that note, we'll let you think about the strange and sad fate of Artemus Ogletree. Until next time, everyone, keep exploring those untold stories out there.